Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Radical Wisdom Conference. This is a 5-day expansive exploration of ancient, indigenous, earth-based, and star-inspired wisdom that has been overlooked by mainstream society, yet that is absolutely vital for humanity to learn together as we break down the old systems and structures that are no longer working and build our radical new world in alignment with light, life, peace, and joy. I am Jocelyn Star Feather. I'm the founder of Sacred Planet, and I'll be your host and guide for the Radical Wisdom Conference. And today I am truly delighted to be here with Emily Britton. Hi, Emily. Welcome. How are you today?
Hello, Jocelyn. I'm so honored to be here and excited to share about the sacred sites of North America and Central America.
Yes, I am so excited about this conversation. And Emily and I were recently traversing Guatemala and Belize together, exploring some of these sites. So I'm really excited to see what will come through as we're talking today. So let me introduce you to everyone here, and then we will begin. Emily Britton is a mystic intuitive, shamanic energy medicine practitioner, theologian, and fellow Earthkeeper. She is the founder of Earthkeeper Healing and offers powerful private healing sessions as well as sacred community gatherings to help us come home to her light, to our light within. Emily has been on the spiritual path since childhood. Through her academic studies of theology, trainings in energy medicine, explorations of world religions, volunteering and traveling abroad, and deep immersion with nature and shamanic practices, she has lived and learned profound wisdom that speaks to the times we are navigating on our planet. From all of these experiences and lived wisdom, Earthkeeper Healing was born as an offering to connect everyone with their own inner soul light and remind them deeply of who they are, where they come from, and why they are here. So wonderful, Emily. Your work is so beautiful that you've been building over the years, and it is a joy to
Yeah.
have you here in the conference.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
excited.
And so your topic for today is awakening the sacred wisdom of the Americas.
Mhm.
And so you've been doing these sacred travels recently in North America and Central America. So could you begin by sharing with us, how did these travels begin? What inspired you to begin on this journey?
Yes, and that is a big question, and it depends on how long you have. I was thinking about this before interviewing today with you. And I thought it would be an easy answer. And as I was starting to explore and reflect, I'm like, oh man, how far back does it go when I actually began exploring these sacred sites? And it brought me all the way back to my childhood that I had kind of forgotten that, my dad, we grew up in rural Ohio. And he has always been fascinated with sacred sites and with collecting arrowheads and different specimens in the farm fields. And I totally took it for granted as a kid. But I still have memories though. As a kid, he would take us go arrowhead hunting. We literally would go out into the fields, especially after a good rain, and he would help us find arrowheads. And it was a fun event with my dad, and I have memories of it. But at the time, I didn't realize what we were interacting with and experiencing. And I did take it for granted. And as I grew older, we go through our teenage years and you kind of really lose sense of the magic for many of us. And we, want to be a cool teenager and explore, relationships and the latest magazines and all that. So that was some of my teenage years. But then somewhere in my early 20s, I was at this time living in Korea. I had this memory, this profound memory of all of a sudden I was hiking with some friends in the mountains in Korea and I saw this river and I don't know what it was. Like it was something woke up in me and the river, the way it was rushing and it was so powerful, it felt alive. And at this point, even though I had been studying theology and I had had a whole lot of other spiritual experiences, I had yet to really interact with nature or sacred sites in this very conscious way as though it's a being. But so I really had no preconceived notion of it. I had no expectation. It was not forced. I just was like, whoa, that river is alive. And then I also had the kind of more mystical, deep sensation of wanting to be the river. I felt both this yearning to be it and I was interacting with it. And that stuck with me. And so that came up as I was exploring what should I share today. So, I realized that both I had this childhood beginning with my dad collecting these specimens, and we also had in rural Ohio there are a lot of mounds, and I know we're going to get into that. And there's so many in Ohio that you also take it for granted, especially if you're living in your local. You're like, whatever, it's another mound. People walk their dogs over it. You just go to a park and have a picnic next to it, and you don't think much of it. And so I didn't think much of it for most of my childhood. So there was this like whole piece to my childhood, and then there was the part of all of a sudden rivers were starting to speak to me. And I didn't think much of it. I was going through a lot of other parts of my personal journey, so I wasn't quite aware of what to do with that. I just remember it. I journaled about it, and that was kind of it. And somewhere in the journey of motherhood, I still was not yet conscious of visiting sacred sites as though it were a pilgrimage, but I started to still go visit them. Like the invitation was there, and I was doing it almost unconsciously. I heard about Chaco Canyon and I was like, I have to go there for no other reason. I don't know why, but I must go there. I made sure I brought my kids and my husband at the time with me. We all went out there in the desert in the middle of nowhere. We did this long trek and we saw Chaco Canyon, and we went to Monument Valley, and we went to the Valley of Fire. We went to the Crestone Mountains, and actually I went to the Crestone Mountains at this point. I was like, I'm just going alone at this time. And all of these, it was deepening me, my journey into the sacred sites, but I still was not quite aware what I was doing. I was saying yes to something bigger than myself. And I will say that with Monument Valley and there was Valley of Fire, those two sites in particular, even though I was still not quite awake on my journey of sacred pilgrimages, I remember the very distinct feeling of these ancient sites, these mountains, like whispering to me. And I was not yet on the shamanic path, but I was like, I feel I hear something. I don't know what it is. It was very mystical, hard to describe and articulate, but it was powerful. And it felt like an activation or a threshold or something. So I think that was part of the journey too. And then I began my deep shamanic journey and really truly stepped onto the path of becoming a shamanic healer and also healing myself. And in doing so, that invitation to visit sacred sites grew exponentially. And in the middle of my training, I was receiving different rites, and I felt this really strong pull when we had the total eclipse in 2024. I got this bug in me, and I'm like, I have to go to Serpent Mound for this. I just have to. I don't care what happens or why or how I'm going to do it. I'm just going to go there. So I made arrangements, for people to watch my kids, and I made my way out there. And I ended up at this huge conference where there are other shamanic elders and spiritual leaders and different chiefs that are all gathering around, and they gather around for the solstices and equinoxes. And I had no idea that this existed, and I found myself there with them and bringing in this total eclipse. And so that was obviously very powerful, and I think that really was the true threshold for me that I crossed through, and I was saying yes to something, and it really opened up my own consciousness to what I was doing. I think the invitation was always there, and now I was actively participating in it. And I think that's probably true for many of us. Yeah. And so I can keep going, but basically from there, I now the invitation was growing stronger. And so in a year later, I was like, I have to go back to Serpent Mound. I don't know why. I'm going to find that woman that led that conference for the eclipse. I found her, and I didn't know her. She didn't know me. I just knew she led this conference. And she's like, well, I'm going to take you down to the underwater dragon. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What's the underwater dragon? I learned about the underwater serpent. And so right next to Serpent Mound is what many believe is the underwater serpent that is the guardian of the lower world. And it's in this Bush Creek, this river well, it's not quite a river, but it's a creek that's right alongside. Serpent Mound. And a quick note about Serpent Mound that it sits at the edge of a crater, a meteor crater. I don't know if I told you this, Jocelyn, but so it's a very mystical, magical place. You can feel the energies when you're there. And so now I found myself literally swimming through a river with this woman I barely knew and receiving, she anointed me with oils and we prayed and we sang and we visited the underwater serpent. And then that just further expanded whatever was happening with my own path. Later in that same summer, I visited another mound and received a rite. Again in Ohio. Ohio is full of mounds, so we will have to fully explore that if we have time. And from there, then I started to really receive the invitation to visit. Before it was kind of these mystical things where I was just saying yes, and then I discovered what was there, and that's still true today. But something happened where now the sites were actually actively calling me. And so I was visiting home in Ohio. So I tend to go, I'm living in Virginia Beach now. So I go home to Ohio a lot, at least once or twice a year. But now it's like turning into I'm actively like, okay, is there a mound that wants me to come visit? Um, and and that happened. It started happening because as I was driving, I would notice different rivers. And so there was a Kanawha River, and I remember driving by it, and I had passed this river many, many times, and I never really paid attention. But for whatever reason, a couple years ago, that river really stuck out to me. I needed to remember the name. I didn't know why. I was like, Kanawha River, Kanawha River. And then lo and behold, on my route returning home, I needed to find a place to stay for the night because I couldn't make it in a day. And I was like, why don't I go by Kanawha River? And lo and behold, there was that where I stayed was right by a mound, right by a mound. And so I found what's happening for me is that I am now just saying yes to something that I don't fully know in my head. And there are the mounds. They keep showing up. And it's profound. And there's a lot I want to say about that, but I'll pause now. Well, I'll pause after. One more thing I want to say is that basically what it led to was that this past spring equinox, I went on a big pilgrimage, which I know you know about, where I visited several sacred sites, mountains, rivers, and mounds throughout northeastern America. And it was the most profound experience of my life. And my huge takeaway was that more of us need to come visit these sites. And it really speaks to your summit of this radical wisdom that's awakening. And I think these sites that have been kind of unnoticed so far by the majority of people, I think it's time for them to be noticed. They're ready. And so that's where I'm like, I have to share this with people. So I'll stop with that for now. And you tell me what you want to explore in all that.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing this story of how this all came to be in your life. And I just love how you've been following the golden threads, you've been following your heart and your intuition. And, even when you said you went to this one place on your own because family was not so interested, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to go. Like, even when there's some resistance from people around you or whatever, you know that you need to follow this. And then the magical things that happen when you do. It's so beautiful to hear about that. And yeah, it's like this is how the land speaks to us. This is how the sites speak to us. And especially these places in North America that we don't have a lot of history around. I know
Mhm.
you're probably going to speak to this. I think it's just so beautiful that you're going there, listening, engaging with the site. So tell us more about that. What are some of the places that you have visited? What are some of the experiences you've had? And maybe starting with North America,
And then
if
leading
that
into,
makes sense in your
yeah.
flow, and then we'll go to Central America as
Yes,
well.
yes, yes, because that's where we were.
Yes.
Yeah, and something you said to you reminding me, I just wanted to share this. So when I was, simultaneously going on my shamanic journey and exploring the Indian medicine and working with Quinto leaves, um, and also simultaneously feeling this call of the sacred sites, I remember so the Quinto leaves, you pray with these three. It's in the Andes, it's coca leaves, but here in the United States we can use bay leaves, and you're actually calling in the sacred sites. And so in my training, we're learning all these sites in the Andes, and they're beautiful, and some of them I've been feeling connected to, but a lot of them I've never visited personally, and so it's not quite that same connection. But I remember in my training feeling like, well, I don't really have any nearby sacred sites. Like, oh, woe is me. And I really like didn't realize. And so now what's so exciting is like, oh, in the training, they're like, you're going to find them. They're going to come to you. And I'm like, really? There isn't any near here. You don't understand. I don't have any. And now I'm like, oh, wow. Like, how clueless was I? Like, they are everywhere, everywhere. And
And
so
just
yeah.
to say where you are located in the world so people know.
Yes, I'm in Virginia Beach, Virginia,
Yeah.
so in the United States. Yes. So for many of us, we don't have like ancient Egypt or Stonehenge or other sites, are down in the South America. So we kind of, many of us, honestly, who grew up in the Eastern United States, especially, I think I can at least speak for myself, felt like we were kind of missing out on the sacred action. But it's not true. I'm here to debunk that.
Mhm.
So, okay, so what was your question now? Sorry, I derailed us a little bit.
Yes, yes. So tell us
Mhm.
about some of the sites in North America and your experiences there, whatever you want to share about a few of them.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh my gosh. So there's so much. So I think it's helpful, first of all, to understand the mounds. And typically, when you're visiting mounds in Northeastern America, you're going to come across three different kinds of mounds. And there are conical mounds, which are usually burial mounds, that they're kind of in that conical shape. There's effigy mounds, which are in these giant shapes of animals and different, symbols. So Serpent Mound is one of those. It's an effigy mound. And then there are platform mounds, which are also like the base of pyramids. And so they're some of them are as large or larger than some of the pyramids in Egypt. However, they're not built up the same. They're using different materials. And usually at the very top of them, we no longer see it, but there was probably like a hut or a sacred, you know, structure up top that has now dissolved into the earth. So there's these three kind of mounds that are very typical throughout northeastern America. There's also the different eras, which is helpful to know. And I will just say I am no expert. I am still learning. It actually, what I have learned in my travels is that it's actually very confusing because you have these layers of history and these different building styles built on top of each other. And all you have are archaeologists kind of piecing things together as best we can. And so some books, contradict each other. There's a lot of different information. And so I would go to one museum and hear something. I'd go to another museum and hear something that contradicted it. So it's confusing. So if anyone feels confused on what is what, you're not alone. I think that's just part of the journey of reawakening these sites. And so I will say, though, that there is kind of the archaic era, then there's the woodland era, and there's the Mississippian era. And I know that there's something really fascinating that you and I might explore in this conversation that we discovered when we were in Central America is that many of these sites that I was visiting, they seem to have been very peaceful up until a certain point. There's no evidence of even having barricades or fortresses. It seemed like a really peaceful community up until about 900 CE. And I know that that's what we discovered in Central America too. And I think that's really fascinating. And nobody really knows why did all of a sudden it switch from being peaceful to now these civilizations needed barricades and fortresses up and so that's just something that's a little like tangent, but it's fascinating to me. And so when you're visiting these sites, this is part of the confusion. When you're visiting, the museum might say, "Oh, this is a Mississippian era, platform mound." But what we're not really seeing is that underneath that is very likely a woodland or an Adena mound that originated that sacred site there. So I needed to remember this myself because sometimes I struggled to connect in with the more Mississippian areas. Those are the ones that follow 800, 900 CE. And that's where you see a lot more of human sacrifices and a lot more war and conflict. And so it was harder for me to connect in with that. And so I consciously had to remind myself, like, oh, there is actually something way more ancient underneath these sites. So I feel like that's important to share in this conversation. So when I'm going to these sites, some of them are just visiting the river. Some of it is going to mountains that throughout, in North Carolina, in Georgia, if anyone knows Stone Mountain. So some of it is these just mountains that are also sacred and living beings, and that's part of the sacred pilgrimage. And then there's the mounds. And so I've visited some of the highlights because I can't answer as far as what were my favorite, but I, there's Okmulgee Mounds in Georgia, which is a huge complex and beautiful. And they have this vast earthen mound you can actually enter. And inside, I believe it's like 47 different seats that you can tell was this sacred ceremonies were held. And there's a raised platform of a raven effigy, basically. And so that was really exciting. And the original clay that they built that in is still there on the ground. So it was really powerful. Um, yeah, so that one was really great. And there's huge platform mounds in Okmulgee. There's Etowah mounds, which I did not get to see. I really wanted to see. And sometimes when you're going on these sacred pilgrimages, you're led in a different direction and you have to listen to where you're going. And so I was not led to visit Etowah mounds on this particular trip this past spring. However, I deeply connected with the river, the Etowah River. So I felt like that was where I needed to be. Um, there are some really profound experiences I had, and I don't know if we want to share those at the end, but there's two that really stick out to me. So one was when I visited Shiloh Mounds, and that is in Tennessee. And it's really interesting because Shiloh Mounds sit where a huge Civil War battle was held at at the same site. And so when you're visiting these sites, you are really visiting these layers of time too. So it can be hard for our brains to process what we're experiencing and noticing and understanding which timeline am I connecting in with. So when I first entered the grounds, you could feel the weight of war. You could feel the presences of people who had lost their lives. And so that was a whole thing I needed to kind of work with and clear and connect in with. And after that, then I could go deeper into the ancient sites, the mounds that are still there. And what's beautiful, though, even though I do not care for war, is that because it became a war memorial, they preserved those mounds. Many of the Civil War, people who lost their lives in that battle, they ended up actually burying some of their dead in these mounds. So they preserved all the mounds. I know it's super fascinating. So anyway, when I'm entering the sacred grounds of Shiloh Mounds, and it's a whole plaza. There's a plaza, there's these at least 3 to 4 huge pyramid mounds, and there's trees kind of covering it at this point. Um, I am giving offerings to every site I go to. And as soon as I place my offerings on the ground, I'm bending down. I have my hand on the earth. I also taste a little bit of the earth. That's my own little doing. But I had this moment where I'm connecting in. I've tasted the earth. I put my hand on the earth with my offering, and I hear the call of an eagle. And I'm like, what? And it flies over me. I can feel it's so low. I can feel the shadow right over me, like that. I feel it. And it lands in this tree right in front of me. And I look up, it's landing on the tree, it's looking at me, and I notice it has a nest. And I'm like, wow, I just need to touch this tree. So I'm barefoot at this point. I'm walking towards the tree, and as I get right upon it, I see this fallen eagle, which I know I shared with you, Jocelyn. It was a really profound experience. I have never come across a wild eagle within a hand's distance like this before. And unfortunately, that eagle had passed on to the other realm. But fortunately, I am a shamanic practitioner, so I did what I could do with the tools that I had, and I released and had my own little ceremony for it. I was still mystified. I'm still a little mystified of what that all meant, but it was powerful and it really stuck out to me. And every single site is so powerful. And I guess the point in even sharing this is that as we come into deeper relationship with these sites, we start to have really deep experiences and receive messages and gifts like this. And so that was my own personal, profound experience there that really just will forever be etched in my memory and my heart. And it just felt like something worth sharing. And I know I shared with you my other experience at the Great Circle. And perhaps I saved that for the very end because it was just such a powerful experience. It was really towards the end of my spring equinox pilgrimage to Eastern North America, but it speaks to the times we're in. And so if there's time, I'll save that story for the end. But
Okay.
then I did find myself in Central America like a month later. And that's where you joined me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm kind of all over the place, but yeah. So before we go
Yeah.
into Central America, do you have any questions about Northeastern
Yeah,
America?
well, I just want to say that I I think it's so powerful and beautiful how you're coming to these places with offerings. And we saw when we were in, Guatemala and Belize, how that just opens doors, right? It's so powerful to be making the offerings. And you mentioned that you were barefoot, being barefoot at these sites, I think is so important because we don't even realize that the shoes are blocking us from a full
Yes.
connection. And when we take our shoes off, it's like it opens us up to receive the energies that are there and connect with the land that is there and the people who used to walk on that land before us. So I just love how you're coming to these sites with an open heart and the offerings and the openness to receive what's there. It's so
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up too because I didn't intend to do any of these things, but it really became very natural. I would show up at each site, totally forget about taking off my shoes, but then it really felt like an invitation. They're like, "Take off your shoes." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I should take off my shoes." And as soon as I do, then I'm like, "Oh yeah, I have an offering. Let me give an offering." Like I just really was, I guess, in the present moment with these sites and not really in my head about what I should do or need to do. It was a deep listening. And it was really special too, because when I would take off my shoes and then I would remember that I have an offering to give, then I would walk and I would just kind of go exactly where I was led to. And I think it was really an honest journey of knowing where I needed to give that offering because my feet were leading me from the earth and it was just pulsing through me. So it was really beautiful. And I will also share that, I would taste the earth of each site. And I know that some people might be squeamish about that, but it's just a little bit and I really deeply yearned to have what was outside of me inside of me. I really wanted to be in this relationship as much as I could, and I also did that with as much as I could the living water that I was interacting with. And I had this nano filter with me, and so everywhere I went I was like had this huge pitcher of river water, and so that was, I think, that really assisted in deeply connecting with the sites. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yes, amazing.
Hmm.
Well, tell us about Central America
Yes.
and what stands
So
out to you from there.
yeah, so I mean, I know it can feel like two different worlds, but I really believe there is more overlap than we realize. I know that that's very controversial in the more traditional archaeological, world, but I really believe that, and there is some evidence of it. I'm not an expert, but I believe there's some evidence of it and mystical evidence. And if anyone has read Edgar Casey's book, I have it right here. This book I highly recommend. Um, it will give you a little bit more insight that goes outside the box in connecting with these sites and understanding the connection that there truly is a connection between Northeastern American sacred sites and Central America and like the Yucatan and Patan. And yeah, so again, even though it didn't quite make sense in my head, I knew I needed to be in Guatemala. And some of that was for my own personal reasons and my journey, my shamanic journey, and some of it, I think, I guess it all is my personal journey, but it's visiting these sacred sites, visiting the sacred Lake Atitlan. And then I knew I really wanted to visit Tikal, and I had missed it the last time I was there when I was with you. And I lightly shared with you that I'm going to Guatemala, and you leapt upon that. And I'm so glad that you did because I wasn't sure if I had the guts to go to Tikal on my own. You get a little nervous traveling on your own. And so
And just
knowing
to
that,
just to say about that, about my coming with you,
yeah,
it was wild because you told me when you were going to be in Guatemala, and you and I had been in Guatemala a couple years ago on a different group. And that schedule that week in my schedule just happened to be completely clear because I was planning to be somewhere else specific. And so I had cleared my schedule and I realized not going to be over there. I'm meant to be in Guatemala with you. So it is just wild how these things happen. It was clearly meant to
absolutely.
be. We were clearly meant to be
Yes.
there at that time.
Yes. Yeah, it was super magical. Yeah, I didn't want to brush that over because it was I didn't even ask you to come because I assumed you were so busy. So I was like, surely Jocelyn could never come join me. And so as soon as I mentioned it to you, you're like, can I come? I'm like, yes, I'm like very ready for someone to join me. And you of all people would be perfect. And so that just already, I think set the tone of what magic we were about to enter. And yeah, so and you and I both can share about what we saw, but we went to Tikal And then we had the guts to go over the border into Belize and visited some magical sites, Tunich, Cajalpeche, Caracal, and I know that there's more that we will be exploring in the future.
Yes.
And it was so vast, I don't know where to begin with those. But I know that you and I probably both share. I really absolutely fell in love with Cajalpeche. That one was
That is a
phenomenal.
magical place, a magical priestess place.
Yes. Yes. Ooh, I got chills. That one
Yeah.
is a site worth visiting that I think does not get noticed. No one really talks about it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we found there was, if you read anything about the Mayan history, it's all about the kings and the wars and the very, very masculine orientation of how, kind of the archaeologists have put the pieces together. And everywhere that we went, we kept finding the women and we kept finding the
Yeah.
feminine, you know, um, like that the lady buried with a puma, the 6 foot
Yes.
tall woman buried with a puma in Zunantunich that our
Hmm.
guy just mentioned offhand. Oh yeah, by the way, there's this 6 foot woman buried with a puma
We're like,
out
wait,
here.
what?
We're
Tell
like,
us that
hold on a
again.
second. So that was very interesting there to have that. It was just like we didn't know we were looking for that, and it was just coming forward like the feminine
Hmm.
side
Yeah.
of
Yes.
history. Mhm.
Hmm.
But anyway, I didn't mean to derail you. Go on.
No. Well, I don't know where that one, I will say, it's so hard because those sites are so immense that it's hard to know even where to begin and what do you share.
Yeah.
Just Cahalpesh for me felt very mystical, magical, exactly what you're saying, the divine feminine. I know I had come across some information, some of the research I had done that it was a mystery school at one time in ancient times. So maybe that's true. It felt true, that's for sure. I know when I was there, I
Big.
could feel like the frequencies. There was moments I had bouts of vertigo and dizziness just walking.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the energy just felt entirely different there. That one, I feel like I just need to sit with it and meditate with it even more to know what we just experienced there. And then Shunan Tunich was another favorite of mine, which is also in Belize. And that one, and maybe it was just because it was divinely timed and it was quiet. Like I felt like we could just sink into the sacredness of it, and there weren't huge crowds. Um, yeah, yeah. I'm just a
Yeah,
ball of.
that's an interesting thing about visiting these Mayan sites, and I'm sure the North American sites too, which I haven't really been to yet. When I go to Egypt, there are so many rules and you can't climb on things, that's for sure. And you have to be very, you can only go over here and over here. And in some places, they don't even let you take off your shoes, although I always try to have my groups take off our shoes if we can. But in the Mayan sites, you're just free to roam. And, you can climb up pretty much any of the structures. Some of them that are clearly marked like not safe because it's falling apart or something you don't climb. But um, they have specifically cleared the largest structures for climbing. You
Hmm.
know, you're that's part of the point is you want to go and climb up to the top of El Castillo at Zunantunich, for example.
Yeah,
And so that is fascinating because it allows you to have a whole different perspective of the site. Things look very
absolutely.
different from, in that case, it's 130 feet up, and you're looking down on all the other structures. And that gives a very different perspective, which is the perspective that the kings and queens and the nobility would have had from up there at the top of the palaces, looking down upon the land. So that's very interesting and very different than my experiences at a lot of other sacred sites.
And definitely taking that even further with the sites in Eastern North America, it's even more wild as far as it's the Wild West out there. You can do whatever you want, is what it feels like, especially if you go at the right time of year, which I happened to realize, spring is a really good time to go. Um, you could really do anything, and there were not that many people. So I was right next to, I went to Cahokia and that's a huge, huge mountain. It's very popular. And I just had my back against it, meditating. I'm like, how can I do this? Like I was thinking in ancient times, I would never be allowed to just rest my back across this mound here. But here I am connecting in with it. No one else is around. Um, so it's really a powerful time to visit these sites. And that's a whole area I could talk about of how strong that invitation is right now for us to go visit these sites right now. It's prime prime time.
Yes, right.
Hmm.
I agree.
Hmm.
I
And
agree.
that's one part that I will share too. When I was, when there's so many different thresholds, I feel like I crossed through in this journey of visiting sacred sites. So and it's not quite linear, and I think that's why it's always hard to share the story because I'm like, oh, and then there was this, and then there was this, but there was a moment in the journey, and I know you'll know this because I reached out to you, but there was a moment in the journey where it was the mound that the river had led me to, the Kanawha River had led me to, and I visited it on my way back from Ohio back to Virginia Beach. And I woke up for the sunrise at this mound, and you can go right to the very top of it, and I did. And I remember placing my hand on the earth, like, okay, what's your message? Why am I here? Why do these sites keep calling me? What do you want me to know? And I heard, first of all, it's time to wake up. We're ready to wake up. I'm ready to wake up. And I was like, okay. And then it was like, tell Jocelyn Star Feather about this. I was like, okay, message received. So I did. I called you at the sunrise. I'm like, Jocelyn, I'm on top of this mound. I just need to let you know.
Yeah, it is so beautiful that that yeah, we're getting the call, you know. And it's interesting for me in my work. I've been taking people to Egypt for a few years now. I've led retreats in Greece. We're going to Scotland this year. Emer and I are going to Scotland with a group this year. It's like this whole invitation is just becoming so big. And
Mhm.
it's, I know it's beyond me. You know, this is not something that I said, oh, in 3 years, I want to be doing this. It's just happened that way. And the teachers have come in and the connections and the guides have come in to make it all happen. And it's so magical to see that. And I see that same thing is happening for you. And
Yes.
and I was just thinking too, you know, you had these adventures in just March and April of this year. I'm sure
Mhm.
you're still integrating it very much so. I know I'm still integrating,
Me
you know,
too. Yeah.
Guatemala and Belize. And so it's like we're just in this place of discovery and also receiving the invitation to bring more people there
Hmm. Hmm.
and bring more people into this place of discovery. So it's really beautiful. It's really exciting.
Yes. Okay. I feel like that's a perfect segue for me to share my story if you're
Okay.
game for that. My
Yeah.
story on the spring equinox, because it speaks exactly to what you're saying, more people coming to these sites. Um, so on the spring equinox, I was knew I would be in Ohio, and there's so many mounds. There's Serpent Mound, which everyone talks about, and I had thought in my head that's where I'll be for the sunrise on the spring equinox. But your mind doesn't know. Your soul and your heart know better. So that did not happen. I was not at Serpent Mound in the morning. I found myself there in the evening, and in the morning, where I found myself was at the Great Circle in Newark, Ohio, where there is an eagle mound effigy, an effigy mound that's in the shape of an eagle. And I had arrived there the night before, thinking that I would just visit it real quickly and then get ready for Serpent Mound the next day. Well, that everything changed. And when I arrived at the Great Circle Mound, I'm walking and it's huge. I can't give you numbers, but it's huge, like several football fields, like big mounds going in this huge circle. And there's big ancient trees growing in there too. And I enter into the circle and I'm walking and the sun is starting to set. And in front of me is where the Eagle Mound is. And right at the top of Eagle Mound is this huge ancient tree. But this tree is literally split in half. I'm not kidding. I'll have to find the photo, but it's split in half. And at this point, I have gone through my most of my pilgrimage. So I'm like, whoa, this symbolism was super powerful. And I'm like, what does this mean? And I mean, I kind of felt what it meant. I mean, spring equinox is like we're coming into balance of light and dark. And so I just seeing this tree split in half, it felt powerful. And I get closer to it and I see that there's someone rummaging around in the fallen branches that are huge branches that had fallen down. And I first was a little judgy and I was like, what's this person doing? Are they smoking or drinking alcohol? But no, as I get closer, I realize it was a beekeeper. And he draws me closer And he's like, "Oh, do you see the bees?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he pointed up, and you look up at this tree. Half of it again is gone, and you can see it's hollow inside, and there's this golden honeycomb inside. And he points up and he's like, "Yeah, that tree's hollow inside." And something about his words at that time really struck me. Like it echoes in my head. Yeah, that tree's hollow inside. For me, it felt very symbolic of the times we're in and the structures that are collapsing, the old structures that are perhaps hollow inside. And what is inside is community, and what is inside is honey and sweetness if we allow these old structures to collapse. So, all of that came to me in this moment with this beekeeper. And he was there to collect the bees so that they could continue cutting down the tree because it could no longer stand up on its own safely with other people, pedestrians around. So after experiencing that, I realized, oh, I have to change my plans. I need to be there for the spring equinox, for the sunrise. So I went on my own. The next day, spring equinox, I wake up, before even the sun has risen. It's dark, little creepy, but I I come out and I light a candle next to the tree and I make myself some cacao and I sit right next to the tree and I didn't know what to expect, but it was really powerful and it could make me emotional now even thinking about it because what I was feeling was both a felt like a funeral and also the birth of something new. And I could feel this tree like speaking to me, like thanking me for being with it in this time of collapse. So that's where I feel the emotion, and it's there right now. I can feel it of just like, I see you, I witness you, okay, and I'm here. I'm here with you. You've held on long enough, and now it's time for you to go. And so it was really, really powerful. And then I was watching the sunrise at the same time, and that was beautiful in itself. And when the time came, I felt like it was time to go. I wanted to look around in the last bits of where maybe the bees had been and the branches down on the ground. And as I'm exploring, I discover all of this honeycomb and like pools of golden honey inside. And I was like crying and laughing and looking at the sun and like scooping up honey and licking it. And it felt like to me the answer to everything. It felt like, oh yeah, like if we can just let these systems collapse, there's honey inside, there's community inside, and it's the answer to everything. And so it just was this most profound experience. Yes. And what I remember as I'm leaving now, and I have to say, as soon as I didn't have any containers with me. I had a little seashell, and I was like, well, I'll scoop up this little bit of honey, and that was I still have it next to me actually. So I got my little gifts from this experience, and I was making my way back. And as soon as I was leaving the tree, the logger truck came. It was ready to come and take all the pieces away. Like the timing was uncanny. But as I'm leaving, I got very emotional because I'm just kind of taking my last look around this huge circle and imagining and feeling how, however long ago, thousands of years ago, there had to have been so many people at this place, so many people gathering and honoring these moments, the solstices and equinoxes in the lunar calendar and having ceremony and connecting with one another and connecting with the earth. And I don't know, it was a very complex feeling, but it was a yearning for and also a deep remembering of. And it made me very emotional because I missed the company of others. And I felt like, how am I the only one here? How am I the only one here? And so I felt this deep, passionate call, which is why I'm here right now, that we need to bring people back. We need to bring people back. So there you go, full circle.
Oh my goodness, I'm so moved. Hearing your story once again, I'm so moved by it. And this message of, the old world, the old structures, the old systems, they're hollow inside. We need to let them fall. We need to surrender to that process of how they're clearly deconstructing themselves. We need to let them go. And there's honey inside. And what a sacred, incredible, sacred substance that honey is.
Yeah.
And it's sweet and it's nourishing and it's life-giving and it's sacred. Um, and the community of the bees. I mean, all of this, it's just so beautiful. So thank you for bringing us that message that
Yeah.
you experienced in such a real way, you know,
Yeah.
for us to hold in our hearts here
Yes.
together as a community.
I'm thankful to be able to share it to more people because it felt like a story that was not meant just for me. It was for many people. So thank you.
Yes.
Mm.
Amazing. Amazing. Yes. And we're working on plans to bring people to these places. So
Yes.
Emily and I will be uh, continuing to work on that. And of course, we will let you all know when the time is right and when the plans are in place.
Hmm.
Um, because yeah, there's so much to be discovered. And I know you've mentioned that when we go to the North America sacred sites, that it's going to be very much about each person in the group listening, tuning in. You know, there's not a lot of history written. There's not a lot of like factual information. And so we're going to be really tuning in, listening, going deep, you know, letting the land speak, letting the mounds speak, letting the animals around us speak, and so on. So
Yeah.
that's going to be a very magical experience. Can't wait.
I can't wait. I really can't wait. And yes, a very mystical experience, deeply intuitive experience. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Hmm.
we'll see what we all discover.
Yes.
It's going to be really fun.
Hmm.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Emily. I'm sure I know we could keep talking about this for about 3 more hours, but I think we
Yes.
can probably complete this conversation
Hmm.
for now. So now you have a beautiful listen to my voice. Um, where Emily and I are having throat chakra updates.
That's so funny.
That's so funny.
For those of
Um,
you, yeah, for those of you who don't know, I'm getting over laryngitis. So I've been popping cough drops this whole talk. And now I've passed it on to Jocelyn.
how funny. Okay, so you have a beautiful free gift that's called Return to Your Sacred Origins Free Guided Journey Meditation. So, do you want to tell everybody a little bit more about that?
Yes, absolutely. So, I hold a lot of space circles for people, and very often I do guided journey meditations with drumming. And we often will go to the lower world, the middle world, or the upper world. And I felt with this invitation, especially with the topic of visiting these sacred sites, I felt very called to lead us on a journey to the middle world, to sacred sites, ancient sacred sites, wherever we are called to go and visit, receive, remember, and activate whatever it is we are meant to activate. So it's a very mystical, intuitive led journey, but it is me. It's on video, drumming. It's very real. I hold the space as much as I can, like I would in a circle, and it will be a powerful exploration and invitation for you to discover and remember. So I'm excited to see and hear about what people do experience in this.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for offering that free gift, Emily. And everybody watching, you can go and scroll down right below this video to find Emily's free gift. And you'll also find links to her website and other exciting ways to explore Emily's work. So, do you want to say anything else about your work, Earthkeeper Healing? Anything else about what you're working on right now? I know so as this interview is airing on the Radical Wisdom Conference, Emily also has a conference going on called Coming Home. So we can link that below as well.
Yes.
And yeah, is there anything else you want to say about what you're working on or
Mm.
announcements of things coming up?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for bringing up the summit because honestly, it really ties into visiting these sacred sites. The whole time I was visiting sacred sites this past spring, the message was remember, come home, come home, come home, come home and remember. And so, yes, I am leading my own summit right now the same week. And it's all about coming home and letting our hearts guide us and discovering the ancient and cosmic wisdom within and creating a new reality from that place. And so, um, this, connecting in with the sacred sites is part of that journey of coming home and remembering. So I deeply feel like the invitation right now from our hearts and from the heart of the earth is to come home, is to remember. And she's just waiting for us. And there's so many invitations. And if we actively and consciously begin making these shifts in our life and starting to by just simple offerings, starting by even connecting in with our own little plot of backyard. That is sacred too. Coming home to the earth, to the water, to the elements. I think that is the invitation of our times, and that's where our new world begins.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Emily. It's
Hmm.
so inspiring, and it's like you said, it's right in our own backyards, every bit of land, every bit of Mother Earth is sacred. So thank you for reminding
Yeah.
us of that.
Yes. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, everybody watching, I hope you've received so much from this beautiful conversation with Emily. Lots of love to all of you out there. And thank you again, Emily, and blessings for all that you're working on right now. I know you're doing
Thank
a lot.
you. Thank you so
Thank
much, Jocelyn, for this opportunity to share these stories with everyone. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And I hope you really receive exactly what you need to receive in the journey meditation. And thank you again. Bye.
Wonderful.
Mhm.
Okay, everybody. Well, I'll see you again in another interview soon, and bye for now.
Bye.